as the #1 quarterback prospect as of right now.
It's almost the #1 quarterback by default in the fact that there's really no one else that I feel comfortable taking in the first round at this point. No one's really stood out from a passing perspective.
Not Deshaun Watson.
Deshaun Watson's been good, but not, he didn't take the next step from what he did as a sophomore. So he's not been that guy. I still think I want to see a guy, light it up as a passer in college. Trubisky's been the closest to that. He has, from a physical tool standpoint, he's been the most impressive in terms of arm and accuracy. Now, he doesn't have the running ability that Watson has, but in the NFL, teams don't value that nearly as much as in college. So I think right now he's the guy, but still, I'm not putting him in my top 5, I'm not putting him in my top 10. He's just, maybe late first round at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I like that we were on Trubisky before the season, put him in our breakout player list, and that was based off about 50 throws he had last year. He completed about 40 of them, but when you go back and look at those throws, they were impressive, quick release, strong arm, accurate. He's carried that into this season. Again, I'm kind of with you. I don't love the top-end quarterbacks. Deshaun Watson's been disappointing for me. I don't think Deshaun Kaiser is the type of QB that you want in the first round. I know that's not your guy either. I know you don't love Kaiser. So I look at Trubisky as a guy who almost by default is going to be teasing that QB1, top quarterback off the board type of guy, but I don't know that he's going to end up near our top 10, say, in the draft board. But very impressed with what he's done this year. Love the tools. He's been pretty athletic too when he's been asked to run. I think he's handled pressure extremely well. That's what I've liked about him most. You'll see plays where the pocket breaks down. He either uses his legs to get outside the pocket and make a play, which is unexpected from a guy like Trubisky, but he's also shown accuracy. So I like what Trubisky's done. I'm looking at the video right here. He breaks the pocket, sets himself, throws a laser, open against cover 2. Check it out in the article. It's a good one.
Believe us, it's amazing. You'll have to take Steve's word for it. I want to, you mentioned the pressure. Now, at PFF, we isolate quarterbacks' performances on deep balls as an example. From a clean pocket versus when under pressure. He's in the top 5 of our adjusted completion rate when he's under pressure. So that's something that stood out. He had the one game, I think it was related to the hurricane. It was a big rainstorm, really rough grade against Virginia Tech. Again, maybe he gets
I don't count that.
He gets a little bit of a pass for the weather. Otherwise, he's graded really, really well.
I did a little look at that. If you eliminate that entire week for everybody in college football, so it's just the cleanest way for me to do that using our stats. If you just take that week out, he's our number 4 quarterback in all of our rankings in all of college football, up there with guys like Baker Mayfield and some others, so and Lamar Jackson. So I love what Trubisky's done. I think he's been one of the biggest risers this year. I'm not ready to put him at the first overall pick in the draft necessarily, but looking forward to diving into him and his tape a little bit closer this offseason.
2 wide receivers made your list, Steve. One, D. Westbrook out of Oklahoma. John Ross out of Washington, the other one. He's got a showcase game coming up against USC. We want to dive into that matchup a little bit. I don't know if we're going to get to see him against Dory Jackson, but that would be yes. A lot of fun. Those 2 guys, where do you sort of roughly have them? I know you're not setting your draft board right now, but where do you have them among this year's receiver class?
I mean, I think they're both in the first round mix. You look at Ross first. If Will Fuller, who I didn't see necessarily as a first round pick last year, I know you liked the game-changing type of speed that he brings to the table.
He ended up going in the first round of the Texans.
And he went in the first round. If the NFL liked Fuller, Ross has a chance to be Fuller with hands. Fuller's got some drop issues. They've carried over to the NFL. I think what you're getting with Fuller, which is some big plays and some big drops. But Ross catches the ball a little bit cleaner, but still has that speed to get behind the defense, the agility to make something happen after the catch. Had that highlight reel play against Cal. And then D.D. Westbrook, he flashed a lot last year when watching Baker Mayfield, but Mayfield was so locked into Sterling Shepard, and rightfully so. Shepard was our top-graded receiver. He's outstanding. But Westbrook's become his top guy, and he has the ability to get open short, intermediate, deep level. He's got the most deep yards of any receiver in the nation. I love the total package that he's shown this season.
I'll throw one more guy in there. I'll put Zay Jones from ECU. I think what he's done this year. I know ECU kind of pumps targets to the #1 receiver and that kind of.
How many targets does he have?
He's got about 268 targets at this point, which is
that a lot?
Insane.
How many more is that than the next closest receiver?
30 more than the next closest receiver in college football.
Mike Evans currently leading the NFL with 99 targets. That gives you an idea.
So that's like 15 games. Just getting throwing the ball again and again. But he's in the top 3 in terms of missed tackles. Catch rate's very good. So I think he's a guy who's moved up a little after a good season a year ago as well.
If you had to take one of those 3 for an NFL team, that you like?
I'm going to take Westbrook right now. I think the overall package that he brings is the best. I think Ross adds that number 2 type dimension. You know, the Texans looked at their roster and they said, we have DeAndre Hopkins, we want Will Fuller on the other side to be the deep threat. I think that's the type of guy that Ross is. But I think Westbrook's a little bit more well-rounded, a guy that I'd be more inclined to take.
Yeah, I agree. I just think there's only so much you can do if you are, that pure deep speed guy. You're just limited. So I'll go Westbrook as well.
Let's talk a little bit more about Ross and that Washington offense going up. They've got a home game against USC. It might be the best game of the weekend. We did our Big Green breakdown video on that. And this is a different USC team that got blown out against Alabama. Now, maybe they would still get blown out by Alabama. We're talking about how good their defense is. But regardless, they've really come around. Sam Darnold, the new quarterback, has been a big part of it. What do you see in this matchup? What are you watching for?
Passing games, both sides. I think let's talk about Darnold for a minute. That team has completely changed since he took over in week 4. Only had 1 loss. It was to Utah. Since then, they've been great. So, I think USC is just a much different team, to your point, than they were earlier in the year. They lost to Bama, they lost to Stanford. Darnold brings a lot more, to the table. Guys like Juju Smith-Schuster having a lot more opportunities than he had earlier in the season. So I think it's that passing game going up against that Washington defense led by Sidney Jones at corner, a guy that I almost put on the risers list until I realized, actually, I think he's always kind of been a first-round type of corner. He'd only been targeted 17 times all season going into the Cal game, who attacked him 13 times, and they only got 3 catches on him, had 2 interceptions, had a pass defense, played like a first-round pick. So looking for Sidney Jones against Juju Smith-Schuster as just this unbelievable matchup on one side of the ball, and then, of course, the other side, the Washington pass game. I don't know if you have any feelings on Browning and Ross and all these guys that we were just talking about.
No, I was going to mention USC's defensive thing, because we've talked a lot about Washington's and there's Buda Baker and those guys. I think USC's DBs are one of the best in the Pac-12, one of the best in the country as well. Dory Jackson, kind of fallen off under the radar a little bit this year after he was so hyped a season ago for all he could do from a punt return, offense-defense standpoint. But he's been fantastic this year. And one of my favorite guys, Leon McQuaid, the safety, he had a great game. He was the only guy playing well in that Alabama game week 1. He's played fantastically this year. So there's a lot of talent in that USC secondary. Probably the most that Browning's going to face this season.
I want to throw out one number for Sidney Jones. His passer rating allowed this season, 18.5.
Wow.
So the stat we always cite,
39.6.
That's if you just throw the ball into the dirt.
Yes.
Play. So 18.5 gives you an idea of how dominant he's been. That's second best in the country.
And it's not even like he's getting targeted very infrequently. So you'd think if you're getting targeted infrequently, you're getting targeted when the guy's probably open, but it's not the case. He's just locked down.
Yeah. He has one of the lowest percentages of targets per game, essentially, of any corner in the entire nation. So, we were having he's not getting as much hype nationally because he doesn't have the stats, because teams are completely avoiding Sidney Jones. Cal did not avoid him, and he made them pay.
What do you make of Jake Browning? You mentioned him when we talked about all these receivers, and it's also Dante Pettis merits mentioning.
Can't forget Pettis.
Washington. I think his receiver rating, you told me this, Steve, was like 158.2.
Yeah, it's near perfect. 158.3 is perfect. He's right there.
He's slacking a little bit. Got to get that decimal on. What do you make of Browning as a passer? I don't know if he's on the NFL radar. He's a true sophomore, so he's not going to be eligible this year. But what do you make of him as a quarterback?
He's going to be an interesting evaluation because he doesn't have a great arm. We talked about John Ross and the speed that he has. They were both. Ross had 3 touchdowns the other day. 2 of them came on deep post routes where Ross had 2 or 3 steps on the defender, and Browning kind of floated these passes and got there. They were good. They got to Ross for a completion, but you don't see that big cannon for an arm. So I think that, from an evaluation standpoint, might hurt Browning. But Washington runs this offense that it's similar to Boise State's a couple of years ago when Kellen Moore was running it. And I think he brings Kellen Moore type of skills to the table with a better arm than Kellen, who's pretty much a high school level arm. But Browning, quick decisions, finds the open man. They do a really good job of using motion to create matchups. Browning just runs this offense to a T. So I love him as a quarterback. You see him, he's a great distributor, taking advantage of having Dante Pettis, having John Ross, having a couple shifty running backs. So Browning is having an excellent season and on the outskirts of the Heisman conversation.
It is interesting that you mentioned Kellen Moore, because that's one of the first names that comes to my mind when I watch him, just because,
it's Chris Peterson's the Washington.
That, and because it doesn't look the part.
There's something to it.
that's the easy comment to make.
Just you watch him more, and it doesn't look the part of an NFL quarterback at all. But he's been an NFL quarterback now for a handful of years. He's survived. I think